a chilling case that rocked Beijing to its core in 2003. Imagine this, a city shaken by a series of gruesome murders, with a pattern so disturbing it left everyone questioning how such a monster could exist among them. Let's unravel the haunting story of Yijiang. It all began in early 2003, when Beijing was gripped by a horrifying string of murders. Over a mere 6 months, 6 men met a tragic end, and their deaths were marked by a horrifying signature. Their genitals had been brutally severed. The killer didn't stop there. These men were also tied up and inflicted with multiple knife wounds. The terror in the city was palpable, and the media was ablaze with speculation and fear. Now let's talk about the victims. All 6 men shared a particular lifestyle. They were homosexuals who frequented gay bars and had a kink for BDSM. This detail would prove crucial in the investigation that followed. The police quickly realized they were dealing with a predator who targeted a very specific group of people. The Beijing Municipal Public Security Bureau, faced with the task of stopping this killer before he struck again, launched a rigorous investigation. It didn't take long for their efforts to pay off. Just months into their search, they zeroed in on a suspect, Yijiang. At just 23 years old, Li was a student at the prestigious Beijing Institute of Technology. On paper, he was a bright, academically gifted young man with a promising future. But what could possibly drive someone with so much potential to commit such heinous acts? The breakthrough in the investigation came when authorities linked the murders to Li's background and personal life. They discovered that Li had a troubled past and struggled with a deep-seated psychological issue. Despite his academic prowess, Li had been leading a double life, one that involved a disturbing obsession with the very lifestyle his victims were part of. This unsettling fascination, combined with his own personal demons, seemed to have fueled his gruesome acts. The turning point in the case came on the evening of March 19, 2003. Yijiang, one of the victims, had been unreachable for a couple of days. His parents, growing increasingly worried, decided to travel from their home to Beijing. When they arrived at their son's residence in Yijiang district, they were met with a scene of unimaginable horror. Yijiang was found dead, tied up, and covered in knife wounds, a sight that would haunt them forever. In their panic and grief, Yijiang's parents called the police. The response was swift, and the investigation took on a new urgency. With the discovery of this crime scene, the police were able to piece together the final clues that led them straight to Yijiang. As the investigation unfolded, the public was stunned. How could a seemingly promising young student turn into a cold-blooded killer? The answer lay in the complex interplay of Li's psychological state, his obsession with BDSM, and his own deep-seated issues. The case highlighted the dark side of human nature and the terrifying reality that even those who seem the most unlikely to commit such crimes can be harboring dangerous secrets. Yijiang's arrest and subsequent trial brought some relief to a city in mourning, but the case left a scar on Beijing's collective consciousness. It served as a grim reminder of how the most ordinary lives can sometimes hide the darkest secrets. In late 2002 and early 2003, Beijing was struck by a series of gruesome murders that sent shockwaves through the city. 6 men were killed in a disturbingly similar manner. Their genitals were brutally severed, and their bodies were left in a state of extreme violence. The pattern was unmistakable, and the terror was real. The police were under immense pressure to find the killer before more lives were lost. As investigators combed through the crime scenes, they discovered that these murders were no random acts of violence. The victims had 3 critical things in common. They were all homosexual, they enjoyed BDSM, and they frequented same-sex dating sites. This crucial piece of information helped narrow down the list of potential suspects. The police decided to focus their attention on individuals who were both homosexual and had communicated with the victims online. Progress came swiftly. Just over 2 weeks after the latest murder, on April 4, 2003, the police made a breakthrough. Their investigation led them to a man named Yijiang. To the casual observer, Li seemed like an ordinary employee at Ping An Insurance Company, working diligently and leading a seemingly normal life. But appearances can be deceiving, and Li's neighbors had noticed something unusual about him. He often brought home different men from gay bars and was known to chat with several victims in QQ chat rooms. With Yijiang now a prime suspect, the police swung into action. They hurried to his rented flat in the basement of Building 12, Luangnan Dongjimen, Dongqing District, Beijing, ready to make an arrest. They didn't expect to bump into Yijiang on the street while he was walking his dog. Surprisingly calm in the face of police presence, Lee greeted them with an unsettling nonchalance, even asking, "Are you looking for me?" Lee didn't resist or argue. He went back to his flat to gather some personal belongings and accompanied the police to the station without a fuss. At the station, the fingerprints found at the crime scenes matched Lee's, leading him to quickly confess to the murders. But his confession was anything but straightforward. As Yijiang spoke about his motives, his demeanor shifted from calm to furious. He revealed that he had targeted the victims because of a deeply personal grievance. According to Lee, 4 of the victims had tied him up and violated him in the past. This brutal act of violence, he claimed, had fueled his rage and driven him to murder. Lee saw the killings as a way to deal with his resentment and seek revenge. The police were faced with a chilling reality. The seemingly ordinary insurance worker had harbored a violent streak and a vendetta that led him to commit horrific crimes. Yijiang's case shocked Beijing and highlighted how someone who outwardly appeared normal could conceal such darkness within. This case left an indelible mark on the city and serves as a grim reminder of the hidden depths of human nature. It underscores the importance of looking beyond appearances and understanding the complex motivations that drive individuals to commit heinous acts. On January 17, 2003, Yijiang met the man whose online profile was paid slave. Unbeknownst to him, this was a setup. After their encounter, Lee brutally murdered him with a Spanish saber he had brought along. The chilling calm of the encounter marked the beginning of Lee's spree. Lee's murderous path didn't stop there. His second victim was Pretty Feet Hottie, a master's student in the Department of Foreign Languages. Using a similar approach, Lee lured this individual to his home. Once there, Lee turned up the speaker volume, ensuring that the victim could not hear his cries for help. After a violent encounter, Lee bound and mutilated him before ending his life. With a taste for murder, Lee continued his spree. His third victim was an older, stronger man who had crossed paths with him. Lee's method remained consistent. He manipulated, assaulted, and then killed. Each murder was marked by extreme brutality, reflecting his escalating rage and desire for control. Lee's fourth and final victim was similarly targeted with the same horrifying precision. But by now, the violence had become a twisted source of satisfaction for Lee. His need for revenge had evolved into a full-blown killing obsession. The killing spree continued for 6 months, during which Yijiang took the lives of 6 men. His methods were consistent. He used online interactions to lure victims, then carried out his brutal acts of violence with precision and cruelty. His transformation from a vengeful victim to a serial killer shocked everyone. The investigation revealed a deeply troubled past that contributed to Lee's descent into violence. Born in 1980 and raised by his grandmother in Shandong, Lee's early years were marred by family instability. When he moved to Beijing for schooling, he faced rejection and abuse from his family, including a mother with severe mental illness and a father who turned to alcohol and violence. Lee's troubled upbringing left deep psychological scars. His family environment fostered anger and violence, shaping his interactions and reactions. In middle school, Lee's struggles with his sexual orientation and the rejection from a classmate named Tang only added to his turmoil. When Tang rejected Lee's advances, Lee's fear of exposure led him to a horrifying act. Tang was brutally murdered in 1994, and his body was found stabbed over 20 times. As the police closed in on Yijiang, the true extent of his tragic and violent journey became clear. What began as a quest for revenge turned into a relentless killing spree, driven by deep-seated anger and a desire for control. Determined to exact revenge, Lee armed himself with a knife and waited daily at the intersection where he had met the man. Unfortunately for Lee, the man never reappeared. This crushing humiliation only fueled his anger and deepened his hatred towards men. Lee's tumultuous emotions became a catalyst for his violent tendencies. Fast forward to 1999. Yijiang, now a college student at Beijing University of Technology, had finally escaped the confines of his troubled family life. Relieved by his newfound independence, Lee found himself drawn to the vibrant nightlife of the city. Among his explorations, he stumbled upon Purple Boy, a popular gay dating website. Immersed in this new world, Lee started spending a lot of money on internet access, money that his dwindling family support could no longer cover. Struggling financially, Lee took on 2 part-time jobs, working grueling 12-hour shifts daily. Despite his efforts, his academic performance suffered. By the end of his second semester, He had failed several courses and, overwhelmed by financial and academic pressures, decided to drop out of college in his third year. In June 2002, Li's life took another turn when he met Tang Zhengxia, a wealthy man who was 7 or 8 years older and worked for a foreign company. Tang, impressed by Li's charm, took him under his wing. He generously supported Li, even giving him money to start a clothing business. Li moved in with Tang, who also bought him a puppy to keep him company. For a brief moment, Li experienced a semblance of normalcy and happiness. However, this period of peace was short-lived. Tang Zhengxia gradually began to neglect Li, introducing him to his other partners and giving him money after their encounters. This betrayal devastated Li, leaving him feeling both humiliated and dejected. In a desperate bid to reclaim Tang's affection, Li threw himself into the nightlife, frequenting gay bars and engaging in sexual encounters with other men. Li's heartbreak and resentment fueled a dangerous path. Feeling betrayed and rejected, his mental state deteriorated further, leading him down a dark and violent road. His psychological scars, compounded by a series of traumatic experiences, triggered a relentless spree of violence. This transition from a victim of betrayal to a serial killer was not just about revenge, but also about a distorted sense of control. Li's rage and feelings of inadequacy morphed into a terrifying cycle of violence, culminating in a series of heinous crimes that shocked the nation. Yijiang's story is a chilling reminder of how unresolved trauma and betrayal can spiral into something truly horrific. His descent into brutality highlights the need for support and understanding for those struggling with deep-seated pain and psychological issues. Li had hoped that his relationship with Tang, marked by financial support and a semblance of affection, would blossom into something more meaningful. But the reality was harsh. Tang saw Li merely as a casual fling, a toy to be used rather than a partner to be cherished. Li's discovery of Tang's indifference shattered him. His feelings of being used and discarded spiraled into deep despair. His attempts to make Tang jealous and rekindle their relationship only backfired, leaving him even more dejected. The cruel twist of fate. Tang broke up with Li, ending their relationship abruptly and leaving Li feeling more isolated and worthless than ever. During this tumultuous time, Yijiang sought solace in alcohol, hoping to drown his sorrows. However, his pain was compounded by memories of past abuses, the brutal treatment from his parents during childhood, the assault by a stranger in his teenage years, and now the heartbreak from Tang. All these accumulated wounds led him down a dark path. Li's sense of betrayal and rejection ignited a dangerous desire for revenge. He was no longer just hurting, he was furious and deeply disturbed. With a past marred by violence and rejection, he chose to channel his rage into a spree of murder, targeting those who shared his sexual orientation. This twisted logic was fueled by his belief that if he could not find peace, no one like him should. His crimes began with a horrifying method. He lured his victims using deceptive online profiles, meeting them under false pretenses, and then brutally killing them. Each murder was an act of distorted vengeance, a way to exert control and inflict the pain he felt on others. In interviews after his arrest, Li admitted that he was driven by a long brewing hatred. The acts of violence that once seemed like a path to justice eventually gave way to a semblance of peace, albeit at the cost of many innocent lives. His deep-seated rage and sorrow manifested into a series of horrific acts that shocked the nation. In October 2003, the legal system finally caught up with Yijiang. The Beijing People's Procuratorate formally charged him with multiple counts of murder. By November of the same year, Li was sentenced to death and stripped of all political rights. The case was a grim reminder of how unresolved trauma and misguided revenge can lead to devastating outcomes. On August 20th, 2004, Yijiang was escorted to the execution ground at the First Intermediate People's Court of Beijing. Remarkably, he displayed calmness in his final moments. After signing the necessary legal documents, he thanked the judge politely, an eerie contrast to the violence he had inflicted. Yijiang's story has sparked significant social concern, particularly regarding the treatment and perception of sexual minorities. While he was undoubtedly a victim of unfortunate circumstances, his choice to exact revenge rather than seeking legal justice was both impulsive and tragic. His actions only served to amplify the suffering, turning him from a victim of betrayal into a perpetrator of horror. Thanks for watching. Please like the video, press the subscribe button, and also drop your thoughts in the comment section.